The briefing had been perfectly clear. Colonel Varek of the Galactic Interspecies Containment Authority had stood before the new human staff member with all four of his chest plates puffed out, his bioluminescent markings cycling through warning red, and delivered the single most important rule of Facility Dreadnought 7. Under no circumstances are you to approach, interact with, or attempt to feed unit designation, Raxor. Ethan had nodded. He had even written it down in his little spiral notebook, the one with the cartoon dog on the cover that somehow made every alien who saw it visibly uncomfortable. Do not feed Raxor. Simple enough. Ethan lasted 4 days. It wasn't that he was reckless. Anyone who knew Ethan Martinez, former zookeeper, former wildlife rehabilitator, holder of a degree in animal behavioral science from the University of New Mexico, would tell you he was methodical, patient, and professionally cautious. But on the morning of day 5, Ethan walked past cell block 9 with a protein bar in his pocket, and he heard something. Not a roar. Not a battle cry. A sound like a very large, very dangerous creature trying very hard to pretend it wasn't whimpering. Ethan stopped. The cell was enormous, reinforced durasteel walls, triple-layered containment shielding, atmospheric regulators tuned to a planet that no longer existed. Inside, sitting in the farthest corner with its massive scaled back turned toward the observation window, was Raxor. The war beast commander of the Kethari Armada. Destroyer of 12 colonial outposts. The creature that had made 3 different alien military species sign armistice treaties simply by showing up. It was curled into itself like an enormous, miserable dog. Ethan checked his notebook. Checked the hallway. Checked his conscience. Then he pressed the intercom button. "Hey," he said. The creature went absolutely still. "I'm Ethan. I'm the new caretaker for this block." He paused. "You doing okay in there?" Silence. "Because it doesn't look like you're doing okay." The massive head turned, just slightly. One enormous eye, vertical pupil, amber gold, the size of a dinner plate, rotated toward the observation window. It stared at Ethan with the full weight of a being that had personally overseen the orbital bombardment of 4 inhabited worlds. Ethan stared back and pulled out his protein bar. "I've got a chocolate peanut butter one," he said. "I don't know if you can eat it. I'd have to check your dietary file. But I've also got an apple, and I'm pretty sure most carbon-based life forms can handle apples." The eye blinked. It was, Ethan would later reflect, the most dangerous blink he had ever witnessed. And he had once worked with a saltwater crocodile named Gerald. The dietary file, as it turned out, confirmed that Raxor's species could metabolize a surprisingly wide range of organic compounds. The facility had been feeding it processed Nutriblocks, a gray, odorless paste that contained exactly the right nutrients and approximately 0 joy. Ethan started bringing real food. Not all at once. Not dramatically. He would sit outside the containment field during his shift and eat his own lunch, and he would slide portions through the approved transfer slot, the one meant for medication delivery, which technically nothing in the rulebook prohibited being used for apples. The first time, Raxor didn't move for 6 hours after the apple landed inside the cell. Then, at 0300 station time, the camera feed showed it picking the apple up with 2 clawed fingers, sniffing it with the delicate precision of a sommelier, and eating it in a single bite. Ethan, watching the recorded footage the next morning, pumped his fist quietly at his desk. "You are aware," said Dr. Thesamine, the facility's senior xenobiologist, hovering at Ethan's shoulder as he reviewed behavioral logs, that Raxor destroyed the last 3 personnel who were assigned to this block. "Destroyed how?" Ethan asked. "Psychologically. It refused to acknowledge their existence until they requested transfer." Ethan looked up from his notebook. "That's it? One of them had a complete professional crisis and now raises kelp on a moon somewhere." "Okay, but it didn't physically." "No," Thesamine admitted. "It has not physically harmed any facility personnel. It simply She paused, searching for words, radiates contempt so powerfully that it functions as an environmental hazard. Ethan considered this. Then he went back to his notes. He had been keeping a behavioral log. Not the official one, that was just metrics and status updates. His personal notebook had observations like, responds positively to lower vocal register. Ears, secondary pair, track sound before primary attention redirects. Possible preference for things placed on left side of cell. Seems to dislike overhead lighting, dims when I reduce it. Has anyone ever just talked to it? Ethan asked. Like, normal conversation? Not commands, not clinical observation. Just talking? Thessamine's expression suggested this question had not previously occurred to anyone. By week 3, Ethan had established a routine. Morning check, standard health metrics, cell environment report, a brief one-sided conversation about whatever was happening on the station that day, a malfunctioning water recycler, a political dispute between 2 alien ambassadors, the ongoing mystery of who kept leaving half-eaten sandwiches in the staff break room. Raxor had stopped turning its back to the window. By week 4, it had started moving closer to the observation panel during Ethan's shifts. By the end of week 5, Ethan sat down on the floor outside the cell one afternoon, back against the wall, notebook in his lap, and said, without looking up, back on Earth, we had this idea that the most dangerous animals just needed to be contained. Locked up and managed from a distance. He paused. We were wrong about that pretty often. A long silence. Then a sound, low, resonant, somewhere between a subvocalization and a purr, if a purr could rattle the fillings in your teeth. Ethan looked up. Raxor was sitting directly on the other side of the transparent containment field. Close enough that Ethan could see the detailed scale patterns along its jaw, the faint scarring across its chest, the way its secondary eyes, smaller, set along the temple ridge, were fixed on him with an expression he had spent weeks learning to read. Curious. Guarded. Something underneath both of those things that Ethan's behavioral training translated, quietly, as lonely. I brought something different today, Ethan said. He reached into his bag and produced a small container. Trail mix. Human thing. Nuts, dried fruit, little chocolate pieces. Pretty sure the dried mango is safe for you. I cross-referenced the compound breakdown with your dietary file. He slid the container through the transfer slot. Raxor looked at it. Then, slowly, it reached out, 3 claws the length of Ethan's forearm, and pulled the container toward itself. It ate the mango pieces first. Then the almonds. Left the chocolate, which, Ethan noted, was probably smart given that the xenochemistry on chocolate was apparently complicated across species. When it was done, Raxor set the empty container down and looked at Ethan. It made a sound. Short, deliberate, structured, nothing like the battlefield vocalizations in the archived recordings. Ethan didn't speak Cathari. But he'd been listening to those sounds for 5 weeks. He wrote it down, sounded it out phonetically, cross-referenced it with the partial linguistic database in the facility archives. Best translation, again tomorrow? Ethan smiled. Yeah, he said. Again tomorrow. The official incident report filed 6 weeks later was, by all accounts, unprecedented. It documented the moment Raxor, war beast commander, destroyer of colonial outposts, psychological hazard rated level 9, voluntarily made contact with the containment field's communication panel for the first time in 3 years of captivity. The message it transmitted was 7 words in translated standard. The human. He may enter. I allow. Colonel Varek read the report 3 times. Then he called an emergency xenodiplomacy meeting. Then he called Ethan into his office and stared at him for a long, unblinking moment. You fed it, Varek said. Dietary approved organic compounds, Ethan replied, with his notebook open in his lap. Within the tolerances listed in section. You talked to it. General conversational updates. Nothing classified. You befriended a war criminal. Ethan considered the word. I think the technical term is established a trust-based behavioral relationship. It's in the animal sciences literature. Works on crocodilians, great apes, corvids. It is not a corvid. No, Ethan agreed. But it was lonely. Varric stared at him. Ethan waited. The Kethari Armada, Varric said, slowly, has been requesting Raxor's return for 2 years. Every negotiation has failed because Raxor refuses to communicate. Right. If Raxor were willing to communicate, the diplomatic implications would be pretty significant, yeah. Another long pause. You have an appointment, Varric said finally, with the Galactic Diplomatic Corps. Tomorrow. 0800. Ethan nodded, wrote it in his notebook, and stood up to leave. Martinez, Varric called after him. Ethan turned. Bring snacks. Humanity, we will find the thing that terrifies the galaxy, determine that it is sad, and bring it trail mix until it trusts us enough to change the course of interstellar diplomacy. Every single time.